G'day everyone, Dikko here with another kick-ass walkthrough. This is part 2A of what I guess will be a multi-part series that is all about 3D modeling for noobs. So as I said in the previous video, I am going to cover both Maya and Blender workflows. So this one is, well, the first Maya workflow. And in the next video, I'll be doing probably the same thing essentially, but in Blender. So yeah, if you want to wait for that, go for it. Otherwise, you can watch this and pretty much do the same thing anyway. So yeah, strap in, let's get started. All right, so depending on what software you're using, and in this case, we're gonna be using Maya, you need to understand how projects work. So different softwares have different ways of managing their projects. So with Maya, it's pretty dumb, really dumb in fact. So we need to actually set up the project with this file, so that when we do get around to doing all the fancy pants texturing and stuff like that, which we will cover, we need to make sure that Maya knows where everything is. So let's get that up and running. We're just going to go to File. We're going to make a new project. Go to the project window. We're going to set up a new project, and we're going to call this one Medieval Home or Medieval Tavern. I'm going to set this into my Maya projects folder. So I'm going to make sure that I navigate to my desktop. In this case, make a new folder, call that, well, in this case, Medieval Tavern. Go onto there, and I'm going to set my project inside there. I'm going to push accept, and what Maya will do is create all these folders for us that you can add your textures, add any references, that sort of shit into your file. Push accept. We're going to go to File again, and because Maya is pretty dumb, like I said, it's very dumb, we need to actually set the project now. Now that we've made the project, we need to set it. Go Set Project, navigate to that tavern, and once you see this little mel script file, don't click on anything, just push Set. And now if I go to save this file, it will actually save it in the right spot. All right, now the next thing I want to do, and don't worry about that error, that's a Maya 2022 bug, as you can see, classic crap, as always with Maya, is we need to just do a little bit of housekeeping. So when I model this thing, I don't want to accidentally click this thing all the time. It's a little easier to do this in Blender, but in Maya, we just need to assign this to a layer and then make it reference. So what I'm going to do is just select the actual object in the outliner. Go to my Layers tab here in the channel box. Go to Layers, Create Empty Layer, Create Layer from Selected. And you can see here now, we can actually turn it off and on as we see fit. We can always reference it as well, which is super cool too. So now I can't click on it anymore. Now with that out the way, we're ready to model. So we'll start off with the base and just get the actual structure of this model up and running first. So I'm going to create a cube, and as you can see, the cube is pretty small because in Maya we work within centimeters, not meters like we do in Blender. So we need to make this a lot bigger. Just going to grab the scale tool here and just scale it up as I need to. And then I'm just going to go into my front view and just place it where I need to. So just make sure it's sort of in line with my sketch. From there on in, I'm just going to go into my edit mode now and start to manipulate the faces only. So when working with a basic sort of boxy model such as this, there are only a few tools that I use. And those tools are bevels, extrusions, knife cut, and I think that's pretty much it. Oh, and insert edge loop. Those are mostly the tools I use for the majority of most of my modeling, and that's across both Maya and Blender. Apart from that, it's more about just manipulating existing shapes. The other thing I like to do is make sure that I'm getting consistent edge loops throughout my model. So a lot of like 3D modelers out there who are pros, they always recommend not to worry about geometry until you start getting familiar with this, like building things. And I think that's a really bad habit to form at the start of, your modeling, 3D modeling sort of journey. I think it's a really bad thing to get too comfortable with. So what I like to do is work within a quad like limit myself to quads where I can. So what I mean by quads, I mean any faces with 4 edges. I want to try and make sure that whenever I'm modeling something, that I'm completely working within a quad like structure, so that when I do get around to being familiar with modeling in 3D, that I can start to break the rules and know when to break my quad like structure at any given point. All right, so I've done the base of this thing, base of the the building here. It's really simple. I can work with just the box there and then add another box on top. But if I wanted to make sure that my poly count is lower, not that it really matters in this case, I could always delete this face here, and then just cover it, because you're not going to see it anyway. That's up to you. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep it as a block for now. The other thing you should be aware of is once you've done this, you should always freeze your transforms and then select all. So freezing the transforms will reset your transforms down to 0 or 1, depending on a scale of 1 to 1, and it'll remove any rotations or scale rotations and translations to that object. We can worry about the pivots later if we need to change that, but otherwise that's pretty much it for that area there. If you want to, you can also create a ground plane. So ground plane is basically just a flat plane that will act as your surface for that that area there. And you'll notice that with Maya, at least, it creates a plane with multiple edges and faces. And if you don't need it, then we should just get rid of it. We don't need that level of subdivision there. So what I like to do is usually, once I create that polyplane, at least in Maya, is reduce the subdivisions down to 1 in the inputs here, the history of that object, because we don't need it right now. Why bother? And that will also become important once we start working on the roof in the future. All right, let's make the upper level, which is actually overhanging over the edge here of this building. So we're going to make the upper level here as well. I'm just going to duplicate this square by pushing Shift D, and you can see it's up. It's been duplicated in the outliner. I'm just going to bring that up like so. I don't care if there's any overhang, because what I need to do anyway is go into edit mode and actually make this wider and make this fit the parameters of my sketch. So I'm just going to grab these 2 edges here, these 2 sides of the edges, and just scale it out like so to take the shape of that. Just going to scale it out like so. And you can see here, it's nice using the grease pencil object or grease pencil sketch that I made in Blender, because it lets you just fill out the, just work within the volume of the sketch, which is super cool. Much more efficient than, in some ways, than relying on image planes to use as a reference. Now, as I mentioned before, I like to work within, just basically working with a couple of tools. So what I want to do is create this roof shape, the actual shape of the structure of that roof. But we've run into an issue here is I don't want to work with triangles. I don't want to actually just make a triangle and fill that in. So I want to work within the quad structure of this shape here to create volume. So what I'm going to do is use either the modeling toolkit with the multi-cut tool here, or right click and use the insert edge loop tool to shift right click to create the structure we need. Now, there's one thing you need to understand about Maya is that it's a powerful software, but it's fragmented. What I mean by fragmented is that there's tools all over the fucking place and they're hard to find, okay? So the easiest way to find the tools is probably using the modeling toolkit, but even like say the multi-cut tool versus the insert edge loop tool, multiple tools exist that do the same thing. So depending on what you're comfortable with, I'd say experiment with it, but I like to use the insert edge loop tool to create my loops. The other thing I like to do is, you see here when you're working in 3D within Maya, is that you get, if you hold down shift and then you move something by accident, you have the potential to accidentally extrude shit, especially when you're starting out. Great for professionals who understand the tool, but really frustrating for people who have never used this software properly and end up making stupid mistakes like extruding things they're not meant to extrude. So what I want you to do is double click on the move tool, go to the smart duplicate settings and just turn off that shit in the smart duplicate settings. Just turn it off. Just don't use it. It's a pain in the ass. It's in the way. Then once you get more comfortable with the software, then you can use it. Close the app, save the file, and then let's move on. All right, the next thing we need to do is I'm going to right click, hold down the, when I'm in edge mode exactly, is add a cut using the insert edge loop tool. So I'm going to click on the edge here, and you can see here that right now my tool is defaulted to adding like hundreds of edge loops. I need to double click on this and just remove that to add that, make that 1, and then relative distance to edge, so I have some control over that. So what I'm going to do is add an edge loop here, and this will end up becoming the roof. I'm going to add an edge loop in the middle now. So what I can do is actually go to this tool again and use multiple edge loops to basically constrain this loop to be only in the center line of this structure. Now, this is why working in quads is so damn important, because this edge loop tool will only work if your structure, the structure of your geometry is quadded. It won't work if it's triangles. It won't work if it is, let's see. It won't work if it is, as you say, what's the word I'm trying to say? If it's like n-gons or stuff like that. So it's really important that you're working within a quadded structure when creating these parts. The other nice thing is that when we come to like adding windows and adding doors and stuff like that, you can add more edge loops and just cut out those holes and you're good to go. That being said, what I want to do now is just lift up these two verts here to create the roof. The nice thing about this method though is that if I want to add more edge loops throughout this entire structure, I can still do so. See what I mean? I can add more loops as I see fit, and it doesn't affect the geometry. Really cool stuff. All right, so what I want to do now is actually create the thickness for the roof. So what I want to do is actually create the roof tiles of this object. When I say roof tiles, I want to have the roof overhanging like the sketch. So let's go into face selection mode. Fuck me. Using the move tool, or selection tool, go into face selection mode. And what I'm going to actually do is separate the roof from the geometry here. Okay? Because then I can extend that out and use this as the base for my roof. So what I'm going to do is go to mesh and go to detach. So I'm going to detach these two edges here. And then I'm going to push mesh separate. So now what I have is two separate objects that have been created from the one. And you'll see here that in the outliner, it's actually separated these two surfaces as new poly surfaces, but it's kind of messed up in this new folder, which is kind of shit. So what I want to do is select these two objects, go to, and you want to make sure that you can delete this history, and this will actually basically finalize this separation as two separate pieces. Go to edit, delete by type, history. And now you'll see it's actually gotten rid of all that history. We can now separate these as separate objects outside of that group, and we can delete that group. Now, you can work within that group, that's fine, but I like to keep it all separate for the time being because you just tend not to get lost as you know, if that's the case. But now we can actually go into edit mode and scale out those edges to create that roof. Let's just switch the move tool back to world. And I'm just going to bring that down a little bit so it overhangs a little bit. And then I'm just going to scale it out to sort of line that up roughly like so. So I get that little bit of overhang in the roof. Now you might be wondering about the overlap in the edges there. Don't worry, because we're going to actually add thickness to this roof to begin with anyway. So that's not going to matter all that much in the long run, because it'll be hidden, to be honest. So selecting those edges, let's give that a little bit more overhang, just a little bit. And what we're going to do is create the roof of these windows here. No, not window, of these protruding parts of the building here. Now, there are a bunch of ways I can go about this. I've done this in the past where I just create more, basically I duplicate this roof, and then I can rotate it into place and scale it down like so. But in this case, I'm actually going to cut some appropriate cuts along this shape here using just the loop tool again, and then sort of build the shape out from there. So what I want to do is, again, grab the edge tool. I'm going to insert some loops now along my geometry here. So I'm not going to turn off the relative distance again. I'm going to create a loop here. I'm going to create a loop here. Now, I'm not too concerned about lining these up perfectly, because I kind of want to have a bit of asymmetry in the house to begin with, because it is a medieval house. So what difference does it make? Let's just make sure that what's going on here is not screwing up. Not sure why it still's got these faces selected in Maya. Again, it's just bugging out a little bit, but don't worry too much about that. But what I want to do, if I want to line it up a little bit more, again, I can just select the edge here, go into component mode, and just move that down along the component to sort of line those up. And again, if I wanted to be very specific, and it will affect the way that the roof is shaped, I could just flatten those out using the world operator. So scale those flat, and they're kind of lined up now. The roof is slightly shifted, but that's okay. All right, so what I want to do is create some edge loops that go along the center line of these roofs here, right? Because what I want to do is extrude out that roof a little bit to get those shapes. So let's go again back into my edge selection mode. I'm going to add an insert edge loop tool again. This time I'm going to make an edge loop down this way, another one down this way, and this one. What I'm effectively creating is the structure I can use to sort of cut out the roof. And you'll see it come to life in a moment. So what I want to do now, and you'll see, is now that we can be conscious about where we're going to place those extrusions, I'm going to use the knife cut tool, or you can use the multi-cut tool now, to create basically a shape like this. So something like this, where I have a cut here like so, and then I cut it a few moments down the line there like so. So if you want to have separate roof tiles, separation between the roofs there, you can do something like that. And then what you'd have after this is something like this. 1, 2, 3. cut it out like so. Then you can flatten that out. Then you can have a nice little bit of like a little cleft between the house parts like so. That's an option for you as well. The only problem now is that we have this little gap, in which case you would have to sort of fill it in. But we can do that really easily. So all you need to do here is select these two parts here, bridge that, and here's a little bit trickier. You'd probably have to extrude out a shape like so. The only problem is that you have to merge those verts here as well. So merge those two verts like so. There we go. Now, if I want to, I can go through and just clean up the shape of those roofs. So just basically just go to the edge mode here. This is the nice thing about this, is that because it's all part of the same shape now, I can still manipulate those shapes, get that roof shape up and running there, like so. That looks pretty good to me. And the nice thing is that all the quadded up areas, it's all still part of the same edge flow. So you can see here, if I try to add an edge loop, it will work down there. It can work down here. It can work down here. Here's a bit trickier because it seems like there is a 5-edge loop here, in which case we can fix that up. See what I mean? When you don't have a perfect quadded up area, you can't get that edge loop working. You need to make sure that is functional. So we'll work that out in a second. But otherwise, we've got a loop here that works, and then loops that work along the roof itself, which is super cool. Before we fix up that little issue there, let's go ahead and do the other side of this roof here. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side of the house. The other option would be to mirror it, but let's not worry about that at the moment. Let's keep it simple. If you've got any edges that you want to like straighten up, just select what you need to select and scale them flat, like so. You'll also note that with Maya, you don't really have any indication of whether an extrude has been like you approved the extrude or not, or approved the certain functions. Whereas in Maya, you have complete control over whether or not a extrusion is accepted or finalized. So you can finalize it before you you know, say yes or no. You can't really do that in Maya, unfortunately. Now, what you can actually do if you wanted to line up these these two faces here is go into your front view, or let's see, top view, front view, left view. That's the left view. Don't want that one. I want to go to front view. Is that if you want to line up those houses a little bit, those little structures, you can actually just select through the mesh, scale it flat, and get them all to be consistent if you wanted to. That's my easy way of, I guess, standardizing both the left and right without having to mirror the object. So you can actually go through, scale them flat. You can see it's all kind of starting to match up now. Cool. The cool thing is now we've got most of that structure working. The only thing we need to do is fix up that that problem we have with the edge loop here. Okay, so I'm going to insert the edge loop here, and you can see we have a problem. So how do we fix that? Well, one way would be probably just to create another triangle here and then fill it in there, or we can optimize it some other way. Let's think. All right, so the way I thought about fixing this would basically be to add an edge loop down here and then delete these ones here. So what we're going to do is go to edge mode, I'm gonna use the multi-cut tool to cut through there to here. Cut through here to here. And then I'm going to select these edges here. Not that one, not that one. Just these ones here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Control delete, not just delete, control delete. And then we have something like this. So now we have the complete edge looped, perfect edge loop structure. Obviously, it does affect the way that their flow will work along there, but that's okay. Because overall, we're not going to have to worry too much about having a nice straight geometry for this particular model. But you'll see that I can add the edge loop here, edge loops there, edge loops there, edge loops along there, edge loops here, 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 pretty much everywhere without it terminating by accident. How cool is that? Now that's really important because what I want to do is add an edge loop here. I want to add an edge loop here. I'm holding down, by the way, I'm holding down control with the multi-cut to make that work. Edge loop here, edge loop here, because what I want to do is get that cartoony shape out of that roof structure. So what I want to do then is now grab these verts and get them to sort of take on the shape that I've drawn for that roof, where it's kind of wonky and sticking out and stuff like that. So what we'll end up having is something like this. Where it's kind of all kind of like, kind of wonky, a bit more, naturalistic, that sort of thing. All right. So if we were to go to our channel box now, check out the view, it's all coming along pretty nicely. We can probably lift that roof up now a little bit. Or we can grab the basic shape of this roof, pull it down. Now, to add thickness to this whole thing, the roof itself, we need to add an extrusion. So I'm going to save that file. And then I'm going to go into my face selection mode and double click everything. And then using the modeling toolkit, we're going to add an extrusion across the entire object. And you'll see here that now everything's turned black. We get these little arrows. We can start to add a little bit of thickness along our mesh. So we get this sort of thing going on. Pretty nifty shit. All right. So now we've added that little bit of thickness. It does require a little bit of work, tweaking. So if we go to, for instance, our front view here, like the actual sides aren't too bad, but if we go to the front view, sorry, we may need to add a little bit of tweaks to this thickness up here to get the thickness consistent across the geometry there. Go through and add that as you see fit. We can flatten these out so the you don't get that weird wonkiness there. Do the same thing here. Let's go through and clean things up. But again, we're keeping it really nice and simple in terms of geometry so that we can actually manipulate this stuff in a nice way. Let's go back to our perspective view. And we're starting to get this really nice sort of layout for the roof. All right, now for the building itself, we can see here that we need to fill in those gaps. Actually add the structure of those other gaps in the from the roof. That's pretty simple to do. All we need to do now is add a few loops. And then this is the reason why I've kept the top and bottom separate, is because I don't want loops going all the way down the house, down the sides. I want to keep it nice and isolated to this object in particular. So again, let's make sure everything's been frozen. That's great. Now let's go into insert edge loop. I'm going to add some edge loops here, here, and here, and do the same thing along the middle. Whoops. Here, here, fuck me, here. All right, I think that will be all right. Because what we can do now is pretty straightforward. Grab these edges here and bring them up. Or probably the better way to do this would probably be to do an extrusion. But first, I noticed that we need to make sure that we're, by the way, I double click that loop. Because the roof is isolated, we need to actually add loops in the appropriate areas. So here and here. Fuck. As you can see, I don't enjoy using that at all. It is a horrible, horrible software. It is so slow to use. Save that. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do now is just go to isolate selection mode. This button up here. I'm just going to see what we can do to bring up our geometry. So actually might just select these edges as such. I'm going to do a extrusion. Up, oops. Like so. This is probably one area where we can get away with some triangles. So what I'm going to do is select these verts here, merge to center. Select these three, merge to center. Select these three, merge to center. And so on and so forth. By the way, if you're wondering if I can get away with triangles for this roof here, the answer is probably yes, in which case you would just go in and add a multi-cut here, if you want to keep things consistent. Because we're not planning on subdividing it, we can kind of get away with that. Though we may run into some issues when it comes to building out some windows in there in the future, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Let's get out of isolate selection mode for now. And we're going to line up these windows now to, or not windows, these walls to the roofs here. So, let's go into vertice mode, select these verts. And if you're wondering why I didn't go with a Boolean for this, is because Booleans create shit geometry, basically. You end up with really horrible, I guess you can say, artifacts. Especially if you don't know how to work them. So it's always good to understand this method first, in my opinion, and then work your way into using Booleans and stuff once you understand how to do hard surface modeling a bit better. So what I'm going to do, bring that over here. Let's get that overlapping the roof here. I'm going to bring that out a little bit. There we go. Lining up all those extrusions with the roof. If you find yourself having a hard time with this, you can always go to wireframe view and just see how everything's lining up. So you can see here we're starting to get a pretty nice little structure, and it hasn't taken too long, about 25 minutes, half an hour. And it's all super clean. When I say super clean, I mean it's relative, but like all the geometry kind of works together to form the structure that we need for this 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 object. Pretty damn cool. Now, believe it or not, that roof structure was probably the most difficult part of this entire model to get done. The rest is pretty simple. Now, I'll probably time lapse what I mean by that, but in order to get the basic structure of everything else, it's basically a bunch of rectangles. So when you look at the fence, for instance, it's just little spikes in the ground. For the supports here, it's just the little bits and bobs there. They're all just rectangles essentially. And the same thing up here. Now, I'm going to time lapse doing these support pieces because in the next video, we'll talk about how to get the windows in, how to get the everything nice and beveled and looking natural, and how to add some detail with all these wooden bits and pieces in between the building. But for this area here, it's really simple. It's basically a bunch of rectangles. So let's get that out the way, and we'll get to these roof parts in a moment. And I think we're good to go for now. We're going to leave it at that for now. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to add the windows. We're going to talk about how to add the extra support structure. And then we're going to talk about how to add the trees and bushes. But other than that, the modeling is really simple. It's not that difficult if you follow these methods. So again, we're not working with booleans. We're not working with all these fucking tools here or all these tools here. We're working with really simple principled versions, principled ways of doing our models. So again, don't try to overthink things when it comes to this stuff. Just keep it really straightforward, and your life will be a lot easier. With that being said, good luck doing this. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you run into issues, I'll try and answer them if I can. Other than that, I'll say catches and have fun. Cheers.